So today, I believe it was today, James Dolan, the New York Knicks owner, coincidentally invited Latrell Sprewell to the Madison Square Garden to watch the Knicks play. And he also invited, seen here, Larry Johnson and the great Bernard King. Not pictured in here, but also invited was Bill Bradley, who's part of those 1970s championship Knicks teams. And this is the first time, if I'm not mistaken, that Latrell Sprewell has been invited back to Madison Square Garden since his retirement. Those of you who are my age, perhaps a little bit younger, definitely older, will remember Sprewell was traded, I think it was during the 2003 offseason, to the Minnesota Timberwolves. Sprewell did not want to be traded to the Timberwolves, if I remember serving correctly. It was not a popular trade at the time. And that trade sort of signaled, in hindsight, the gradual decline of the New York Knicks franchise. Now, before that, they weren't a championship quality team, but they were still a relatively decent team. They still would win, I'm just going off memory, maybe 40-something games. May have had a couple of seasons on the 50, but they were a decent squad. And with the Eastern Conference at the time not being a powerhouse, the top teams, I'm thinking back in the early 2000s in the Eastern Conference, were probably, the Orlando Magic when Tracy McGrady was there. They were contenders. You had, of course, the Pacers. You had the Nets, who were starting to come into their own. The Sixers, of course. But there was no definite, dominant team. But the Knicks were still, as a Knicks fan, you were still, okay, we're still in the mix of things. Something can pop up. But this man, James Dolan, has slowly destroyed the franchise while having most of the blame go towards subordinates. Isaiah Thomas, his great buddy who he protected for so many years when he was in the front office and also coaching on the sideline for the Knicks. Okay. Larry Brown got so much to blame. Players who've played for the Knicks over the years have gotten the blame. But I've never seen a guy, and like I said before, I'm not a big fan of his game, but Carmelo Anthony is getting way too much blame for what's going on with New York Knicks. He's actually having a decent year offensively. So it's not his play necessarily. Maybe his style of play is wearing thin with New Yorkers, but it's James Dolan. See, this weak PR move, to borrow a phrase from the Silence of the Lambs, you try to prick me with this blunt tool, doesn't work. Everybody can see what you're doing. You're trying to cozy up to Knick legends and make it seem like everything's all good. I hear they were playing Welcome Back Carter theme music or whatever. Doesn't work, man. It's you. See, I talk to a friend of mine from time to time. We grew up together, guys, and he was originally from New York. He came down here as a kid. He lost both of his parents tragically, but he's made a success of himself in New York. He's, of course, a grown man now, and he's lived in New York now for the past 16 years. And he's representative of the forgotten Knicks fan. You see, the people who were chanting Oakley and fire Dolan, they most likely weren't sitting immediately behind Dolan. These are the people probably in the cheap seats. These are the people who used to be who the New York Knicks organization and the players like Oakley and Daniel and Starks, gritty, garbage pail players, even Ewan to a great extent. These are the people that team used to represent. Now you go to New York Knicks games and you see these latte drinking, bourgeois liberals. Not to be political, but New York City is a pretty liberal town. You got these liberals who really aren't basketball fans, but just there because it's the chic thing to do. Let's go watch the Knicks play, with these expensive. How much does a courtside seat cost? $20,000 maybe? Who can afford that? Except for the rich and famous. Real Knicks fans are very frustrated because New York has changed so much. And New York basketball has changed so much. I mean, you look at the Knicks teams of the 70s and 80s and 90s, and you had, like I said, the team of the 90s and in the 80s, it was Bernard King. It was just him, but, he was a hard-nosed player. In the 70s, oh, my God, Bill Bradley, Phil Jackson, Dave DeBusschere, may he rest in peace, Walt Clyde Frazier, Earl Monroe, the great Red Holtzman on the sidelines. And those type of players, we don't have that anymore. We have a bunch of rich ball players who could be great, but they're more interested in getting paid, getting laid, and just playing to the next contract. Financially, they're successes, but basketball-wise, they're mediocrities. And New Yorkers are getting tired of mediocre basketball, and they're getting tired of James Dolan. But the media, like I said in a recent video, won't call them out. Now, this is one of those subscribers who said that I was out of line saying, using the slave owner analogy. Well, first of all, let me say this. When I say slave owner, I'm talking about every player, even the white ones. Kyle Korver, to an owner, is property. Property who he can, trade away and sell legally. All right? In my personal opinion, the American job market is based on the American slavery system, except for we can't be killed for insubordination, supposedly, and we get paid for our services. So really, to be more precise, instead of a slavery system, it's more of an indentured servitude. But if you notice, Americans are working harder for less money, while the rich get richer. And like I said before, there's a tie-in with Oakley and the way New Yorkers reacted to that. It's a tie-in to that and the way our society is. There is, guys. People are fed up. Basketball is a microcosm of life. People are very angry about a lot of things going on right now. And in conclusion, I'm going to say this about James Dolan, right? You got guys like James Dolan and Donald Trump, right? Why are they so sensitive to criticism? I mean, you criticize James Dolan like Charles Oakley did. You get banned from the Madison Square Garden. You have a legend like Marv Albert criticized the New York Knicks and James Dolan, who's been a broadcaster for decades, all the way back to the 1960s. Oh, here comes Willis. And the crowd is going wild. Back in 1970, right? He gets banned. James Dolan did that. That man. Criticize him, he bans you. The other guy in 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, you criticize him, he goes on Twitter, has to retaliate. Oh, I have to get the last word. You think with all of this money, they'd be more secure. Why are you so insecure? Your money, your prestige, your power. someone criticizes you, it stings so much. It's because despite all of that, all of this wealth and you know, and power and prestige that you have, is it that you're still that sad little lonely boy in high school who couldn't get the girls and got beat up all the time? And Donald Trump, you are probably very insecure because you're lacking in one area that most men are very sensitive about. That's my take on these two cretins. But tell me what you guys think.